afternoon. There's an unpopular opinion. Stress is good. Nobody's complaining, so let me elaborate a bit further. Stress is good because without stress, we, as a species, wouldn't be here. If we had not been stressed to be eaten by other predators, we would not have been motivated to, get up on our hind legs so we can survey the landscape better, see these predators coming earlier. We would not have thought about using tools to compensate for our, admittedly, rather meager physical stature. We were not the strongest out there, right? We were, back then, not even the smartest. Many people argue we are still not the smartest, but that's a different topic. More recently, without stress, nothing much would actually get done. We would probably end up sitting on our couches, barely being able to motivate ourselves to get up off this couch, get another bag of chips so we can go back watching series, binge style. So stress is good because boredom that would ensue without this stress, without us being motivated to do anything, would result in a certain amount of restlessness and would eventually dominate our lives. Ironically, this kind of not doing anything instead of doing really too much is also a sort of stress. Let me explain a bit who I am and why I'm here talking to you about stress. So my name is Sascha, you heard that one already. I was born in Vienna, Austria, as you may have heard as well with my accent. In 2011, I moved to Brasov, where I have been living since, which was a good move in my opinion. Everybody, and probably a lot of people in the room are right now thinking, but why? And I'm not kidding, it's not only people from Austria or Western Europe when I talk to them about this, even people in Romania, when I tell them about this move, they go, but why would you? Well, simple answer, it's a really nice country. We have a lot of nice people here, very well educated. Fortunately for me, most of them speak very good English, so I'm embarrassed to admit I still don't speak proper Romanian. The thing is, while I'm still feeling, sometimes at least, like a kid, and according to my wife, more often than not behave like a kid, I'm actually a father of 2 kids myself right now. I don't know how that happened. Well, obviously, I know how it happened. I was there, but you know what I mean. More professionally speaking, and we heard this also in the introduction, I spent basically the last 3 decades, which is longer than most of you have been around, figuring out how I can work better myself as an individual, and then take it to the next level and make people work better together, either as small teams or as whole organizations. This is also one of the focus areas at my current job. At LIMITL3SS, I'm working with 2 fantastic teams in HR and IT. Our main purpose is basically to provide the organization with good people and then give these good people everything they need to do their jobs as well as possible and, very important, have some fun while doing it. By the way, these 2 teams from HR and IT, these are also the ones who organize this whole thing here. So you see how lucky I am to work with this kind of people. Yes. More recently, and this is something I'm going to come back to again later when we're talking about the motivation behind it, I started to play in the field of content creation. For anybody who doesn't know what content creation is, it's a very fancy name for going and producing anything that you can put on the internet. In my case, it's mostly YouTube videos with limited success, but it's limitless, so maybe in the future this will change. But anyway, it's not so much about the success, it's more about getting into the experience, learning something new. Besides all these things, believe it or not, there actually remains a bit of time, which I usually spend reading or, coming back to being a kid again, playing video games. So there you go. Now you know all about me. Big question is, why would somebody who thinks that stress is actually good come here today and talk about how to reduce and manage our stress levels? Well, simple answer. Because too much or constant stress actually sucks. Significantly. You will know this yourself, right? If you have various stress factors in your life, everybody does. This can be annoying colleagues, can be crazy deadlines, can be the pressure you have from all kinds of messages, notifications, and other things coming into your various channels all the time. Can be the fact that everybody on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok seems to have the perfect life, and for whatever reason you don't. Now, having this kind of stress constantly or having too much of it obviously has bad effects. We also heard it before when Kasper talked to us about work-life flexibility, which I also like much better than work-life balance. You have negative mental impact. You get anxious, you get potentially depressed. You might think that you're just not good enough for anything anymore. You have physical impacts. You might start eating very badly. You gain weight. You might get obese, which obviously nobody wants to do. You increase the risk for getting a stroke, a heart attack, all these not so pleasant things. So yes, let me emphasize and to repeat myself, too much stress really sucks. Question is, how do we know that what is too much? And what do we do when we find it out? Now, too much is obviously different from person to person. Too much stress might be very different for me than it is for anybody else here or elsewhere. Fun fact, we learned that it's actually not the amount of work that that is the main driver for stress, for too much stress. It's rather the relationship between the challenges we are facing and the skills we have to solve these challenges and to overcome them. So if you find yourself in situations that you simply cannot cope with, that are simply overwhelming, then obviously you're going to find yourself somewhere in this red triangle. You're going to be anxious. On the other hand, or on the flip side of the coin, if you're constantly working on things that are tedious, boring, and don't even require two of your synapses to just talk to each other, you will feel bored. As I mentioned before, these are two very different types of stress, but neither of them is actually good. Now, this chart, I think, is fairly well known by now. Probably you have seen it in one way or the other, in one shape or the other. What I like about it is, of course, the channel in the middle, the zone, the Goldilocks zone, if you like, or as it is originally called, the flow channel. This is where you would like to be. Question is, how do you get there? Well, the formula is simple, right? Look at the chart. If you are dealing with challenges where your skills are either just enough to deal with them, or at least you have a decent chance of overcoming these challenges, then you will be in this channel. Note that this is not a thin line, it's an area, so there's obviously some wiggle room. And clearly, this is where we want to be. Now, nobody can be in this flow channel all the time. It's just not possible. The good news is, it's also not necessary. It turns out that if you manage to spend as little as 10 or 20% of your time inside this area, in this flow channel, this is actually enough to suck up the remaining 80 or 90% of anxiety and boredom. Now, in this context, it's also important to note that just because you're not in the flow channel itself does not mean that you're at one of the edges or corners of these triangles. Usually, a lot of activity happens here in these border areas, in this just beyond the line outside of the flow channel. And that's the reason why it's enough to have 10 to 20% of your work inside the channel itself. So that's good news. Now, how do we know that we have too much or too little stress? Fortunately, there is a very easy way to assess this. One of the easiest indicators of your stress level being too low or too high is your actual performance. And when I say performance, then I mean this in the most generic sense. This is not just about work, but also about your private life. How you interact, how you behave with your friends, your family, and of course, if you have them, also with your children. Because, let's be honest, children are awesome. So if you don't have them yet, trust me, they're great. As I said, I have 2 of those, and 99% of the time, they're just fantastic, they're a delight, they're fun to be with, but then, there's this 1% where you're like... So you take a deep breath, or 2, and try to be a good parent. This is clearly not the case when you're in this first phase in this diagram. We said performance is one of the easiest indicators to use to identify our stress level would be too low or too high. Now, if your stress level is too low, you are in what is called the bore-out phase. As the name suggests, you are bored out of your mind, right? Again, sitting on the couch, binge-watching series, or not even that. All joking aside, this is when you find that you cannot motivate yourself to do anything at all. At some point, if it gets really bad, you can't even motivate yourself to do the most basic things, like, cleaning yourself up properly. So when your neighbors come over looking if you're still alive, you know you need a shower. You want to get out of the bore-out zone. How can you do that? You can do that by challenging yourself or by accepting challenges given to you by others. Once again, this can be professional or private ones. Doesn't have to be about work. Find a hobby. Execute a sport, learn a sport, get better at a sport. Whatever it is, or chess, or play Catan if you wish, right? Whatever it is, try to challenge yourself to get out of this phase. If you do that, then you get into the zone that everybody knows about, the famous comfort zone. And this is where your performance starts to increase significantly. So this is not linear, this is an exponential increase in your performance. And hand in hand with this performance increase, you will also notice that you feel better. Right? So suddenly, brushing your teeth is not so annoying anymore. It actually feels good. And in this zone, you want to get initially, but you wouldn't want to get stuck in there. Everybody knows the saying, if you want to evolve, if you want to get better, if you want to achieve special things, you need to get out of your comfort zone. I'm traditionally bad at getting out of my comfort zone by myself, which is why, once again, I'm very lucky to be married. Spouses, I see spouses, very politically correct, read wives, are very good at kicking husbands out of their comfort zone. And husbands should be very grateful for that, because if they do, you will find yourself in the stretch zone. Stretch zone is where you really would like to be. This is where you're at peak performance. Stretch zone is also the zone which is the hardest to stay in. It's very easy to slip back into the comfort zone for obvious reasons. I mean, who doesn't want to be comfortable? But it's also very easy to go too far. You get into the stretch zone if, like the name suggests, you stretch yourself. You set higher expectations for self. You set goals that are somewhat harder to achieve, but still realistic, still achievable. Impossible goals are not a good idea. So you have to keep this balance, and in this case it's really a balance, not between work and life, but a balance with work, life, family, friends, hobbies, anything you want to do. All these things are part of who you are and how you live. So this is the balance you need to strike there, and this is the challenge you are facing. If you were to push yourself too far, you would start noticing that once again your performance level drops. You would start experiencing stress symptoms, as we mentioned before. And if this is the case and you notice it early enough, what you can do and should do is once again take a step back. Maybe you pushed yourself a bit too hard. Maybe you took on too many challenges. Maybe the ambitious goal you set was actually a bit too crazy. And that's okay. You can change that. You can take a step back, make sure you get back into the stretch zone. If you fail to do that, you will inevitably slide towards the zone where nobody ever wants to be, but increasingly many people end up, the burnout zone. That's not cool. I mean, the name itself is already not nice. Being there is even worse. And getting out of it is not easy. Most likely, if you find yourself in a burnout zone, you will not be able to get out of it all by yourself. Which is why, if you know somebody, or if you find yourself there, I strongly recommend to ask for help. There is no shame in it. Ask your employer if it's a work problem, ask your friends, ask your spouse, your girlfriend, your family, it doesn't matter. But ask for help to get out of it. So much for the theory. We promise practical tips, and this is what the rest of this session is going to be focused on. Since I have only limited time, even though the timer is not running, so I don't know exactly how much, somebody will have to give me a sign at some point. I'm going to focus on 3 areas which I think affect pretty much everybody, not just here, but all over the world. It's about work, family, and health. If you tackle those, and everything I'm going to tell you here today is something you can start doing tomorrow. You don't need to read smart books, you don't need to go to college, you don't need any other additional help. It's really completely up to you. When we're talking about work, I will focus on effectiveness, on planning, and on efficiency. We will also hear what's the difference between effectiveness and efficiency, because very often these two get confused. About family, it's very much about quality time. So I think it was also Kasper who mentioned that it's not so much about how much time you spend with people, but how good the time is you spend with them. And then, small advice, which should be clear, but let's be honest, we are all guilty of not following it all the time. Humans are still more important than devices. So maybe it's a good idea the next time you're sitting with somebody at dinner or you have friends over to just put the stupid phone away. And instead of dealing with these people like background noise, just actually focus on them. Listen to them, talk to them. It used to work, before we had mobile phones. It was quite fun, actually. Last but not least, we have health. This is all about physical health with exercising, working out, doing some activities, and of course, some advice towards a better nutrition, better diet, and then mental health, which, again, I'm not an expert, so just to be very clear here, if you want professional advice, you know where to go. But once again, these are things that I tried that are working for me and that I will be sharing with you about attitude. Okay, starting with effectiveness. By definition, effectiveness is about doing the right thing. When you talk to people and say, how can you reduce your stress level, for example, at work, they instinctively think about how to do more in the same way. That's not effectiveness. Sorry, not in the same way, in the same time, my bad. This is not effectiveness. This is efficiency, right? If you want to achieve more in any given time that you're currently doing, you need to find ways to do the things faster. That's efficiency. Effectiveness is about doing less, or to turn it around, to maximize the things that you're not doing. To do so, there are two excellent tools. One is goals, one is priorities. This is once again something that you most likely have seen. When we're talking about goals, we want them to be smart. Smart not as opposed to stupid, but following this acronym, meaning goals should be specific, so they're clearly described. They should be measurable, because at some point in time, you will ask yourself the question, did I achieve this goal? And then you better know. I mean, otherwise it would be rather depressing, right? Working towards a goal for I don't know how long and not knowing whether you achieved it. They should be achievable, so something that actually can be done. They should be realistic in the sense of you have control over it and you do not depend on external factors entirely to achieve a certain goal. And last but not least, they're supposed to be timely, meaning until when do you want to achieve something? Now, we just passed like 2 full months, right? Who of you was sitting on New Year's Eve and making New Year's resolutions? Something like, I want to eat healthier, I want to do more sport, I want to, I don't know what. Any New Year's resolutions? Yes. Okay, no, keep them up. Who is still doing all the things they were promising to do this year? If you're not, put your hand down. Yeah, exactly. That's how it usually goes. Now, why is this the case? Is what we're going to look at in a second. First, I would like to help you by talking about priorities, because once you have these goals identified, you need to find a way to prioritize them. The easiest way by far is to say, okay, imagine I could only work on one single thing, what would it be? Right? That's like the very basic level of prioritizing. A second method, and of course there are many out there, but a second method that I really like because it's simple and easy to use is the Eisenhower matrix. The idea here is that you simply take your goals or tasks, works with either, and then you rate them in terms of urgency and importance. So if something is urgent and important, it would go into this green quadrant. So do it, like now, start doing it. If something is important but not urgent, then it would go into the quadrant where you say, okay, you decide when to do these things. You schedule it for later. Then we have those which are not so important but urgent. There it might be a good idea to think about delegating it. Now, I understand goals are sometimes difficult to delegate, but in order to achieve our goals, we need to define some steps to take to achieve those. And maybe some of these steps can actually be delegated. And then the last quadrant is, of course, for things that are neither important nor urgent. Common sense recommends, of course, not to do them at all. Coming back to effectiveness, right? Don't waste the time on stuff that's neither important nor urgent for you. So we prioritize our goals and our tasks. And once we have done this, we need to see how can we actually fit all these things in our very busy schedule. Now, I'm a big fan of planning. People who know me know that as well. I prepared a bit of an example how a typical workday in terms of hours and their distribution across the different blocks looks like. Quick disclaimer, this does not mean that every day is exactly on the minute like this. These are like guidelines and averages, but it is the idea that I keep in my mind whenever I'm planning stuff. So, every day I sleep. Not that much of a surprise. During weekdays, I sleep pretty exactly 6.5 hours each day, which is okay. I also spend per day somewhere between 4 and 5 hours, 4.5 hours, either doing things with my family or doing sport, right? Any kind of sport. Then, since I was not born rich, still didn't win the lottery, possibly because I'm not even playing, I'm actually working 8 hours a day. So full-time job also needs to be considered. And the remaining time I spent most recently on content creation and on relaxing and playing. Now, I am a planning nerd, but I'm not nerdy enough to actually have a block in my calendar to sleep for 6.5 hours. Not doing that. This just happens kind of naturally. I also do not have a single block in my calendar that says you need to work for 8 hours. I think my calendar in terms of work looks very much like yours probably. You have your meetings and calls and maybe some tasks that you have to do at a certain time. But what I do have in my work calendar, and what I also recommend as a practical tip for you guys, is to block time to focus on specific tasks. Even if you don't know the task yet, the idea is, and this is what I do, every workday, I block 1 hour per day in the period where I know that I'm the most productive, the most focused, where my brain is, well, working as well as it can work. And this hour is reserved for whatever thing requires my focus the most on that specific day. What the thing is, I don't know yet. I have this blocker in my calendar. I put it in on January 1st. It's a repeating event until December 31st. I don't know yet what I'm going to work on October 12th, but I know that if there is something that requires my focus, I will have time for it. Because, and that's the nice thing about it, once you block this time, everything else arranges around it. Because nobody can book this time away anymore. Now, weekdays obviously look slightly different. Major difference, there is no red block. There's nothing for work. Again, that's a rule. I do work on weekends sometimes, but I really try not to. So unless it's really necessary, there is no red. Instead, I distribute the time on nice things. Things that are good for me, like family, sport, sleeping more, right? Because 6.5 hours kind of works, but 8 hours is better. Good. Talking about efficiency, there are many things that you can do to increase your efficiency, new or old technologies, implement them, embrace them, improve them. Think about the way how you work, change the process, remove steps if you can, redesign your workflow, prioritization we discussed already. So in the interest of time, I would like to focus on a specific one here, which is about building strong habits. Habits, and here we're coming back to our New Year's resolutions, can help you a lot. The tricky thing with New Year's resolutions is, just because it's like December 31st and you say, yeah, next year I'm going to be super sporty, or I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to gain muscle, or whatever it is. Doesn't work like that. It does not work overnight. You need commitment, you need consistency. Two good things here. First, you can do this any day. You don't have to wait until January 1st to start. Believe me, really works. Doesn't really matter. Second good thing, you don't need to make drastic changes quickly. It's totally fine to start with small changes because these changes are going to compound over time. Now, a habit, or my favorite definition of a habit is that it's basically something that you do often and regularly, sometimes, if you get lucky, in the case of good habits, without knowing that you're actually doing it. So that's like the nirvana state of executing habits. In the beginning, when we're learning new habits, it's always a bit of a struggle. Which is why, as I said, start with small habits. Don't say you want to be a superstar tomorrow. Say you want to be a bit better tomorrow at whatever it is you do. Whether it's about eating healthy, or doing more sport, or something at work, or learning a new thing. Just a bit better every day, and over a year, this compounds to a huge impact. The second thing that is good about setting reasonable habits or small habits in the beginning is that we tend to be able to execute it more frequently and more consistently because there is something known as the motivation wave. Motivation wave means that, especially when we start a new habit, like, January 1st, well, after we sober up, so January 3rd, we are usually very motivated. Yeah, that's it. This is the year where I'm going to do that. So we have a high motivation. And then we start, and it's hard, right? It sucks. And then something happens, and today, I would really have liked to work out, but I can't because that's really important, or for whatever other reason. And suddenly, you haven't done what you wanted to do for 2 days. And then, now I lost already 2 days. Is it actually worth going back? If you start with small habits that are easy to do, with small improvements, the motivation wave still drops, but it's because it's so much easier to do, you still have enough motivation left to actually execute, especially if you make it easy. Now, this is a very high level and quick summary. If you want to know all the details about it, highly recommended to read Atomic Habits, if you haven't yet. If you have read it and you're still not doing it, read it again. Now, how can I make a habit easy? Very practical example from my own experience again. I said, okay, I want to eat a healthy diet every day. Now, okay, I didn't say that. My wife said, you need to eat a healthy diet every day. That's very hard, right? So first, what is a healthy diet? And really every day? I mean, I like pizza, I like burgers. I like most of all eating unhealthy snacks in the evening. Kids are finally sleeping. You saw before these 2 hours of relax time. That's usually somewhere between 10 and midnight, right? You get time to do, I don't know, read a book, or if you're too lazy, just watch something stupid on TV and snack. That's what I like to do. Obviously, that's not great. I mean, I'm not in my 20s anymore, barely, but I can't keep doing this. So what I said instead is I break it down. I say I want to start each day by drinking 2 glasses of water before drinking or eating anything else. That's easy. I have been doing this for months. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost me anything. I wake up in the morning, wake the kids up, go down to breakfast, 2 glasses of water, easy peasy. Then, again, inspired by my lovely wife, intermittent fasting. Does anybody know what intermittent fasting is? Okay, quite a few people. Quick summary. The idea is you eat during 8 hours of the day, and then for 16 hours you don't. Quite simple. In our case, it looks like we tend to eat dinner around 7, and then until, 11, I think, the next morning, you're not supposed to eat. And this conflicts with my snacking habit, right? Because 10 p.m. is pretty much between 7 and 11 again. So, which is why I knew I can't do intermittent fasting every day. Also, apparently, you don't have to. So I said my habit will be to do it 4 times a week, which mostly works. And the third one in this context, I used to drink a lot of sugary beverages, or to be very specific, Red Bull, right? So not even just Coke or Pepsi or anything, but really hardcore Red Bull, like a lot, every day, for years. Sometimes I'm surprised at my life, right? But then again, I'm probably so well preserved, I won't decompose for a century. So once again, this was a hardcore bad habit, almost like smoking for some people. And I said, okay, I have to get rid of this stuff. But once again, I knew giving it up completely, I don't know, that's hard. But saying I don't want to drink this stuff at least 5 days per week, and then maybe on the weekend or at some point, I enjoy something, that works. So do your habits, define them, make them easy, write the motivation wave, and you are going to get there. So you notice all these things can be done easily and quickly. Moving on to the mental part. For me, this is a lot about attitude. And here, I want to draw your attention to the idea of stoicism. Don't worry, not the full-blown philosophy, Marcus Aurelius and everything. No need. There are 2 things in Stoicism which I want to give you on the road. First, something called the trichotomy of control. The idea is that there are basically 3 things in our lives all the time. Things we can control completely. Things we can control a bit, but not entirely. And things we have no control of whatsoever. Now, the idea of Stoicism, one of the ideas is, to spend most of our time on things we can control a bit. And when I say most of our time, then I mean most of our worries, right? So when we think about things, when we worry about stuff, let it be about stuff that we can partially control. Then spend some time on the things you can completely control. Guess how much time you should spend on things you cannot control? Bingo, none. Because why would you? You cannot change the things you can't control. You can't influence them. The only thing you can control is how you react to them. The second thing is not to care about being better than other people. Doesn't matter how good they are. If they are better than you are at the moment, maybe they deserve it. Maybe they're just born smart, or maybe they worked hard, or both. Doesn't matter. Don't compare yourself to how other people are. You should more focus and care about getting better yourself every single day. Again, you see there's a bit of a parallel. Getting a bit better every day is completely enough. You don't need to wake up tomorrow and go ahead and win the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? Just get a bit better in whatever you want. Pick one domain that is of interest to you or important to you. Get a bit better if you want to. Don't go and play a tennis game with the intention to kick the other guy or to blow the other guy off the field. Right? Go there with the intention to play the very best tennis you can play. Because if you do that, and if you keep getting better and better every day than you were yesterday, eventually you are going to be better than the other people. If you want to know more about this, second book recommendation, and the last one, I promise, A Guide to the Good Life. This is like the updated version of Stoicism, very compressed, very up-to-date with practical tips how to do this in real life in the 21st century. All right, so let me summarize. To manage and reduce your stress levels, very practical things. First, be effective. Identify the right things to do. Don't waste your time and efforts on the wrong things. Plan your time. You don't need to plan it minute by minute, but think about how you want to spend your day, what important blocks are in there. Especially when you're busy at work and you have challenges that are often popping up, try to block focus time. Actually, at 3SS, a few months ago, we introduced the idea of having focus time across the organization. I can't say how many people really stick to it, but the basic idea is that during week, I think it is from 10 to 11, or 11 to 12, something like this, we highly recommend and suggest that everybody just focuses on their own stuff. No calls, no meetings, turn off your notifications. By the way, most productive app on your phone? Flight mode. Turn on flight mode. The world is not going to burn if you're not available for 1 hour. I know it's hard to believe and everybody's super important and crucial, but really true. Then be efficient, doing things the right way. So we do the right things, we do them in the right way. Build habits, remember, SMART goals. It's enough to improve a bit every day, ride the motivation wave. Last but not least, be healthy, work out a bit. Again, you don't need to say, I need to have a six-pack. I mean, I would love to, but that's not going to happen anymore. But I say I want to work at least 3 times, I want to work out 3 times per week. Again, it's not a crazy ambitious goal. It's possible, it's relatively easy, can be done. And work on your attitude. Question is, why shall we do that? Why shall we reduce our stress levels? Why would we bother with all these things, with habits and goals and everything? The answer, 4,696. Not 42, 4,696. This is how many squares are on this grid, and this is also how many weeks are in your life if you live to be 90 years old. So let's imagine it's all our birthday, right? All our birthday today. We were born today, 21 years ago. This means 1,096 weeks of our life are gone. That's not too bad, right? It's not scary. I mean, we spend a lot of time with getting self-sufficient, not needing diapers, you know. We spend a lot more time on getting educated, preparing us for the rest of our lives. That's not scary. This is me. I'm 49 years old. I'm beyond the bold, fat line in the middle. So 50% is behind me, right? Assuming I get to be 90 years old. Red Bull, probably not. Yeah, I mean, with the Red Bull in my system, 90 years seems optimistic. But it's just one more reason not to waste time. As so many other people think, if I had known 20 years ago what I know today, my life would have been different. Well, you are fortunate. You came here today. Many smart people, very good speakers, and me, told you some things that can help you, that can make your life better, make it worthwhile. You don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to have it all figured out today, but pick some of the things, whatever applies and helps you best, and start doing it tomorrow. Whatever you want to do, it's your life. Everybody gets a life, but only that one. It's up to you how you live it. I have like 5 seconds left for questions. So if you have any questions, maybe we can be merciful and shoot 1 or 2 out right now. Otherwise, I will be more than happy to talk to you outside. And if there are no questions whatsoever, it's time to wake up now because we are going to come to the interesting parts again. So thank you, mulțumesc, and köszönöm.